Now, eventually, your responsibilities expanded into Eastern Europe, especially, many countries, but including Ukraine. I'd love to hear your history with Ukraine.
When I had the success with Tattoo and the other artists that we were signing, and they were hitting number one. I signed 6 artists, and all 6 managed to make the top of the charts. And we were doing pretty well with selling international music too. Eminem had sold hundreds of thousands of records in Russia, and this really helped develop hip hop. So I was doing really well in my job at that point and getting some recognition outside of Russia. And my bosses in London were noticing this, and in Los Angeles at Universal. And I was eventually promoted to become vice president of the entire Eastern European region. And that was a great opportunity because now I was no longer helping Russia develop its music industry. I started working with smaller countries and all the other former countries of the Soviet Union. So Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Iceland, Poland, Czech, Slovakia, all those countries, we were still developing them into modern music markets. Bulgaria was a very important market. I went to Belarus. I was the first Western record executive in Belarus. It was scary. It was definitely scary. Lukashenko was a dictator then, and I don't think he appreciated Western pop music, and I doubt that he does now. I went to faraway places like Kazakhstan, right on the border with China, and visited Almaty. So I saw some really exotic places, and I was always the very first Western record executive to step foot in those places. So I got a lot of nice welcoming parties, and was asked to participate in song contests and a lot of interviews on TV, talking about the importance of music and the importance of protecting the music industry. The country that I loved working in the most, though, was Ukraine. I always loved Ukraine. I had visited Ukraine as a student way back in 1992, only from the train. I was coming home from a summer course studying Russian in Leningrad, and I took the train to Budapest via Ukraine. So I went through the whole country of Ukraine. I wasn't even allowed to get off the train, but I saw the Ukrainian countryside from my train window, and I saw those golden fields of wheat, and that reminded me of my family farm back in Ohio. And I knew I felt a connection with Ukrainians, if only for the agricultural connection. But fast forward 7 years later, it's 1999, and now I'm a record executive with Universal Music, and I'm there to open up the very first Western record company in Kyiv. And that became, I think, one of the most important things I did in my career. Ukraine, for centuries, has been overshadowed by Russia, politically, militarily, obviously, and culturally. Frankly, a lot of Americans don't know that much about Ukrainian culture because we often assume it's Russian culture, but it's not. It's not. They're really, Ukraine has its own beautiful, rich, and deep culture that has never been shown to the world like it should be, and hopefully like it will be. But I was able to help at least with music by opening up that music market in Ukraine. And by starting a record company there, Universal was the first, but others followed. And eventually the Ukrainian music industry grew, and they started to develop some of their own stars. And they have been, frankly, at the Eurovision Song Contest, more successful than any of the newly liberated countries of Eastern Europe. It's incredible how many times they've been, and I know, Fred, you are an expert on Eurovision, and we talk about how fond we are of the Eurovision Song Contest and how important it is. But for Ukraine, it really was their chance to show the world they're not Russia, they're Ukraine. And they've won it twice in recent times.
Even more now.
Oh, with the recent victory with Kalush Orchestra, that was their third victory, right? And so helping Ukraine escape from the shadows of Russia, at least culturally, at least with music, that was one of the most satisfying things I've done in my career.
Now, you did go back to Ukraine in May of 2023, which I thought was a very brave thing to do. But tell me why you went back and what you experienced there.
Well, I wanted to see Ukraine. Since the war broke out, my heart had been breaking completely. I was devastated by what the Russians were doing. And I wanted to see how the friends I had in Ukraine, the artists I'd worked with in the music industry, how they were holding up after this war. It had been a year of war. So in May of 2023, I decided to go back, and it was right when the Eurovision Song Contest was scheduled to be broadcast on TV. As you know, Ukraine had won the year before and had earned the rights to host Eurovision. But because of the war, the broadcasters had decided to move the contest to Liverpool, and it would be broadcast from Liverpool that evening. So I wanted to be in Ukraine that night because I knew what a big deal it was. I knew what a tragedy it was to lose that. Eurovision is a great thing for a country. It brings in revenue, tourism. It's a very prestigious thing to host the Eurovision Song Contest. It's a week-long event, so it's a big deal. And I just felt like it was important to be with friends and colleagues there that evening. So I flew to Warsaw, and you can't fly to Ukraine. It's a no-fly zone because of the war. The Russian MiGs will shoot you out of the sky if you try that. They've done that before to a passenger jet. So I took a 17-hour train ride from Warsaw to Kyiv. And when I was there, I met up with my friends, and I saw some terrible things. I saw a lot of bullet-ridden cars and bombed-out malls and shopping centers and apartment blocks. I saw a lot of the damage that the Russians had done. But I also saw heroism and great strength and courage demonstrated by everybody, from the folks that make the trains run on time, to the hotels, to the taxi drivers who rushed me to a bomb shelter when I was out. So the Saturday evening when the song contest was broadcast, I gathered with friends in their apartment. We were all excited to root on the Ukrainian entry, which was Tvorchi, a great electronic duo. And the moment the TV show comes on and the logo for Eurovision and that music, introducing the show comes on, and all of Europe is watching this live, 300 million people. That's the exact moment the Russians decide to launch a hypersonic missile at the city of Kyiv. And it was the first time a hypersonic missile had ever been used, ever in a combat situation. So it was expected that this is considered the fastest missile ever created. And of course the alarms go off, the air sirens go off. So the taxi driver very bravely took me to my fallout shelter, bomb shelter. We knew a hypersonic missile was on the way to Kyiv. The Ukrainians are so advanced, they've created an app for your phone that tells you what kind of missile is coming and when it's expected to hit. It's incredible. I guess a war creates these kinds of things out of necessity. But so I knew I had a certain amount of time to get to safety. And that's where I stayed the rest of the evening. I missed the entire Eurovision Song Contest. Fortunately, and I'm very proud of this, an American Patriot missile knocked that hypersonic missile out of the sky, intercepted it. That had never happened before. And the Ukrainians have shown that they can take American technology and do things that even we had never done with this American technology. So that was a very, very heartwarming moment to know that our American technology had saved the city, saved my butt too as well, you know, that evening. I unfortunately missed the show, but I still was so happy to have been in Kiev for that moment. It was important for me to be there. And even though Ukraine didn't win that evening, it still was a big deal for Tvorchi to have made it, because the Russians even launched missiles at their hometown the night of Eurovision. The Russians were upset. They had been disinvited by Eurovision, and so they were sending a message.